Jai Gurudev, and thank you for joining us today. Today again we have with us an art of living expert and an officer of the Vedic Dhamsans. And today we are going to discuss about the day 4 of the Gyan Ganga session conducted by His Holiness Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankar Ji. So let's begin our discussion. So why does Gurudev start by asking who has not faced difficulties in life? Jai Gurudev, and thank you for joining us today. So Gurudev's opening question is not rhetorical, it is a mirror. The moment he asks, who has not faced difficulties, the mind drops its personal complaint and suddenly sees the universality of suffering. This is the first step of wisdom, dissolution of mind. In Art of Living, we say, Samasya sabki ek, man ka boj. Everyone carries some weight. When Gurudev repeats the question, he slowly dismantles the ego that believes my struggle is special. In Sanatan Dharma, this teaching appears in the Mahabharata, Vaman Purana, Ramayana, and the lives of saints. Even avatars faced difficulties. Sri Krishna faced Kamsa, Sri Rama went to exile, Vamana confronted Bali's ego. Gurudev reminds us difficulties do not diminish divinity, they refine it in Gyan Ganga. He connects this to Prarabdha Karma. Certain experiences come as part of our soul's curriculum. Recognizing this releases a resentment and allows one to walk life's path with dignity and devotion. Now, how do difficulties shape one's spiritual maturity? Gurudev often says difficulties are like sandpaper, they polish you. Without friction, there is no shine. When people come to courses feeling broken, they leave stronger because suffering shakes you out of autopilot. It forces self inquiry. Who am I? Why am I here? This is what happened to Gurudev's own disciples. Through challenges, they discovered deep resilience to Sudarshan Kriya, meditation, and knowledge. In Vedic thought, difficulties awaken viveka or discrimination and vairagya or detachment. When life is smooth, the mind sleeps. When challenges arise, the mind awakens to dharma. Scriptures say, Dukkham Sankaranam Ayatam. Sorrow can lead one toward Shiva. Even Jesus, whom Gurudev referenced, faced trials that expanded his compassion. Hardship pushes the seeker from the external world to the internal world where the Atman resides untouched. Gurudev mentions, when did I know the meaning of life on earth for me? How does one discover meaning? The meaning emerges not from reading books, but through a shift in consciousness. Many people discover life's purpose after a crisis or confusion. Gurudev shares the secret purpose reveals itself when the mind becomes silent. In meditation, the fog clears. Suddenly, you realize life is not happening to me, it is happening through me. You recognize your role in the larger universe. In Vedic Dharma, meaning is tied to Swadharma, one's natural expression. When Gurudev reflects on discovering life's purpose, he points to a transition from personal struggle to universal service. Scriptures say, Loka Sangraha Vapi Sampasyan Kartu Marashi. Act for the good of all. Meaning is found when life aligns with dharma, seva, and inner clarity. The Gurudev says he could not read and write at one point. What is the significance? He's illustrating that wisdom is not dependent on formal education. Many saints never had classical schooling but embodied extraordinary intelligence. Gurudev is showing that divine knowledge flows when the mind becomes clear, not when it becomes stuffed. People think enlightenment requires intellectual training. He breaks that myth. In Sanatan tradition, rishis received knowledge through Shruti or inner hearing. Their literacy came after their inner awakening. Even Adi Shankaracharya wrote commentaries at 8, not because he studied formally, but because consciousness was awakened. Gurudev's reference symbolizes that the source of knowledge is the self, not memory. Now, what does Gurudev mean by every week something different was happening? This refers to the dynamic nature of consciousness. When we grow, life stops being repetitive. Every week brings new insights, new clarity, new experiences. Meditation makes life fresh, and difficulties stop looking like threats. They become teachings. This also reflects the karmic unfolding. Life's events appear chaotic, but they follow the soul's evolutionary plan. When awareness grows, one sees the pattern behind the pattern. How does the reference to Vaman Avatara relate to personal struggles? Gurudev Vamana's story is about humility, dismantling ego. Gurudev subtly points out that often life often shrinks us, like Vamana shrinking Bali's pride, so a real growth can begin. Exactly, Vamana didn't punish Bali, he elevated him. Difficulties also elevate us. If seen with the right attitude, Vedic stories are metaphors for inner processes. Now, why does Gurudev repeat, Am I not doing anything? He is teaching effortlessness. The enlightened one acts without a sense of doership, even while accomplishing tremendous work. This is Gita's Karma Yoga. Karmanyavadikaraste. Do but don't own the action. Now, what is the meaning of am I not aware of nothing yet? This refers to the paradox of enlightenment, knowing everything yet identifying with nothing. In Vedanta, this is a shunya or purnata, eka, emptiness and fullness are the same. Now, what is Bhajanika Thirvat Kerala? It hints at Kerala's devotional traditions, especially their rhythmic meditation and chanting. Kerala follows a Tantra plus Vedanta plus Bhakti traditions harmoniously. Gurudev appreciates that. Now, what do festivals teach spiritually? The festivals shift the mind from monotony to gratitude. They remind us of abundance. Festivals are energy resets aligned with astrological rhythms. The Onam, the Vishu, the Shivratri all elevate the consciousness. Now, Gurudev compares festivals across regions. What deeper message is he conveying? When Gurudev speaks about empathy or local festivals being celebrated on different days across India and Kerala, he is conveying a powerful message about the unity within diversity. The exact date doesn't matter. What matters is the bhava, the inner feeling. Spirituality is not rigid, it is fluid, adaptable, and deeply cultural. Gurudev wants people to understand that celebration is not bound by the calendar but by consciousness. When the mind is joyful, every day can be a festival. And through meditation, gratitude, and seva, we learn that celebration is an inner event, not an outer ritual. Now, in Vedic tradition, festivals exist not merely for enjoyment but for energetic alignment. Although different regions celebrate on different days, the intention remains the same, honoring divine energies. Gurudev's example shows that Sanatan Dharma is not uniform but universal. It accepts multiple expressions of devotion. This is why Krishna could be loved as a child in Vrindavan, a warrior in Kurukshetra, and a philosopher in the Gita. When Gurudev points this out, he reminds us that spiritual maturity includes accepting all paths as valid. With this lens, we stop judging practices and begin appreciating traditions with reverence and inclusiveness. How can one transform the difficulties into spiritual strength? Dear Gurudev teaches that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. The transformation happens when you stop fighting reality and start observing it. Through Sudarshan Kriya and meditation, the nervous system gains resilience. Instead of reacting to difficulties, the mind becomes capable of responding with clarity. Many participants share that what once seemed like trauma becomes a turning point. The real secret is breath is the bridge. When breath settles, the emotions settle. When emotion settles, the wisdom dawns. That is how difficulties become teachers. Now, in scriptures, every hero undergoes a deep crisis before rising. Arjuna faced emotional collapse before Krishna revealed the Gita. Nachiketa experienced rejection before discovering immortality. Rishi Valmiki lived a life of ignorance before becoming a sage. What transformed them was not the external difficulty, but the inner shift in understanding. Gurudev echoes this timeless truth. Difficulties are catalysts that push the soul toward tapaha or the inner strength. When seen with awareness, even suffering becomes sacred because it burns impurities and awakens a deeper consciousness. Now, why do people think their suffering is greater than others? Because the ego isolates, it constantly says, my pain is unique. This keeps one trapped in a personal story. Gurudev dismantles this illusion through compassionate humor. When he asks, have you not faced difficulties in your life repeatedly? He invites introspection. Once you realize everyone suffers, the heart becomes soft, comparison drops, jealousy drops, and a sense of common humanity arises. This is essential for spiritual growth. Now, in Vedic psychology, this is called ahankara bhranti, the illusion of separatedness. Scriptures remind us that joy and sorrow are universal. The moment we see suffering as a shared human experience, compassion awakens. Gurudev is guiding us away from victim consciousness toward dharma consciousness, where we understand life is not happening to me, it is happening for my evolution. This shift dissolves self pity and opens the door to wisdom. Now, how does one find clarity during confusion or emotional heaviness? Yeah, Gurudev, clarity doesn't come by thinking, it comes by pausing. Gurudev often instructs do nothing, just sit in silence. The emotional fog clears, Sudarshan Kriya oxygenates the brain and resets the nervous system, bringing instant clarity. Meditation connects you to the intuitive dimension where answers emerge effortlessly. In Vedic texts, clarity is called Buddhi Parakasha, the illumination of intellect. Rituals like pranayama, chanting, fasting, and satsang purify the inner instrument. Gurudev harmonizes ancient methods and modern understanding, showing that clarity is not acquired, it is revealed when the agitation is removed. Now, how can one stay centered when life feels unpredictable? As Gurudev mentions, every week something different. practice equanimity through pranayama and meditation, the mind stops swinging with external events. Gurudev teaches the art of resting in the self, a space untouched by change. When consciousness expands, unpredictability becomes adventure, not anxiety. The Bhagavad Gita says, Samatvam yoga uchyate, equanimity is yoga. Unpredictability is the nature of Prakriti or the material world. Steadiness comes from the Atman. Gurudev guides seekers to shift attention from changing situations to the unchanging self. Now, what is the deeper meaning of not knowing how to read or write initially? It symbolizes, in a sense, Gurudev is showing that spiritual intelligence is innate. Even without literacy, one can be connected to the deepest truths through silence and intuition. Ancient rishis received the Vedas through meditation, not through big books. True knowledge or jnana is experiential, not academic. Gurudev's statement reminds seekers of this eternal truth. Now, how does devotion help in overcoming hardship? Negative devotion dissolves fear when you feel held by a higher presence. Difficulty shrink in art of living. Bhajans uplift the emotional energy instantly. Devotion creates surrender, and surrender brings peace. Bhakti is the quickest path in Kali Yuga. Saints say, Naam Smaranan se sadai safal pata hai. Chanting cleanses the heart, devotion brings grace, and grace resolves obstacles effortlessly. Now, why does Gurudev mention examples from different spiritual traditions, including Jesus? Because truth is universal. Gurudev does not speak for one religion, he speaks for humanity. He shows that trial, sacrifice, and awakening appear in every spiritual lineage. Sanatana Dharma embraces all paths. Gurudev echoes the Upanishadic spirit, Ekam Sadvipra Bahuta Vadanti. Truth is one, sages call it by many names. Now, how can a seeker maintain enthusiasm on their spiritual journey? They are to daily practices of Sudarshan Kriya, meditation, Seva, and Satsang. Consistency keeps the spirit bright. Gurudev says, knowledge is oxygen for enthusiasm. Keep learning. Discipline leads to joy. Scriptures prescribe the Nitya Karma, daily actions that purify and uplift. When routine becomes sacred, enthusiasm becomes natural. Now, what is the core message of this segment of Gurudev's Gyan Ganga talk? The essence of this segment is that life, with all its difficulties, is not a punishment but a process of awakening. Gurudev repeats different variations of the same question. Have you not faced difficulties, to bring the seeker from personal grievance to universal understanding? When we see that everyone carries challenges, the ego's tightness dissolves. From this softness, wisdom arises naturally. Gurudev wants the seeker to realize the difficulties come to deepen your awareness, sharpen your mind, and soften your heart. They are not obstacles but stepping stones to higher consciousness. This shift liberates one from victimhood and brings empowerment. Now, the core message is deeply rooted in Vedic wisdom. Life on earth is a Leela, a divine play. Challenges are woven into destiny to purify the mind and reveal the Atman. Gurudev's references to Vamana Avatar, Jesus, festivals, and his own childhood show that every soul's journey contains struggle and transformation. When a seeker understands this, surrender happens. With surrender comes peace, and with peace comes clarity. Thus, the central teaching is, see the life through the eyes of knowledge, not through the lens of suffering. When knowledge dawns, difficulties lose their sting and become channels of grace. Now, how does Gurudev use repetition as a teaching tool? The repetition is one of Gurudev's most powerful methods. He uses it not to emphasize a point mentally, but to penetrate the subconscious. When he asks, have you not faced difficulties repeatedly? The mind's usual patterns breaks. Instead of reacting or giving a quick answer, you start feeling the truth behind the words. This is similar to how mantras work. The meaning deepens with every repetition. Gurudev's style awakens awareness rather than mere intellectual understanding. In Vedic tradition, the punarukti, or the sacred repetition, is used to purify the intellect. Scriptures like the Upanishads and the Gita repeat key ideas to ingrain them into consciousness. Repetition removes the avara or the mental covering and awakens the viveka or discernment. Gurudev stands in this lineage. His repeated questions act like a mantra that peels away ego layers, forcing seekers to look within. Thus, repetition becomes a spiritual instrument that refines the listener's awareness. Now, why does Gurudev mention that Jai Gurudev? So, and what does Gurudev imply when he says, I am not doing any work here? Gurudev is referring to the state where actions flow spontaneously without a sense of doership. Though he is constantly engaged in humanitarian work, teaching millions and guiding communities, he remains internally untouched. He teaches that the real action is effortless when the ego does not interfere. This is why his presence feels light, joyful, and natural. When we act from the same space, work becomes play. and results become graceful. Now, this echoes the Nishkam Karma Yoga from the Gita Karmanyavadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Act wholeheartedly, but do not claim ownership. As saints operate from this plane, Gurudev's statement means that his actions arise from cosmic will, not personal desire. I am not doing anything reflects a state where the individual ego dissolves and only divine flow remains. This is the ultimate Vedic ideal of action. Now, what does the phrase "Am I not aware of nothing yet" mean spiritually? Jagdev, this phrase points to the paradoxical nature of enlightenment. The enlightened one is fully aware yet not attached to any object of awareness. There is a total perception but zero clinging. Awareness becomes expansive like the sky, holding everything but owning nothing. This is why Gurudev expresses it as aware of nothing. It means aware but free from the labels and the mental noise. In Vedanta, this is called Nirvishesha Chaitanya, pure consciousness without attributes. It is also described as shunya or emptiness that is simultaneously purnata or fullness. Gurudev's words reflect the Upanishadic truth that the self is beyond all concepts. Awareness without object is the highest spiritual state. Now, why does Gurudev mention Kerala traditions? Jagadev, Kerala has a deeply devotional culture with powerful chanting, temple rituals, and spiritual discipline. Gurudev highlights Kerala to show that India's richness lies in its diverse expressions of devotion. He appreciates every region's uniqueness and uses examples like Bhajanika Thiravata to show that spirituality is woven into daily life across the country. Kerala is rooted in Tantra, Vedanta, Ayurveda, temple science, and classical music. Gurudev's reference honors the lineage of great masters like Adi Shankaracharya, who hailed from Kerala. His mention creates cultural pride and reminds listeners that spirituality flourishes in many forms across Bharat. Now, how do festivals uplift the consciousness according to Gurudev? The festivals create a collective joy when people come together, sing, cook, laugh, and share their energy. Rises Gurudev often says, celebration connects you to the present moment. Festivals break monotony and remind us to live with gratitude. They recharge emotional batteries and renew enthusiasm. In Vedic astrology, festivals coincide with the planetary alignments that uplift the prana. For example, Navratri aligns with the lunar energy, Diwali with new moon abundance, Shivratri with the cosmic stillness. Gurudev's teachings integrate spiritual and the scriptural wisdom with the modern understanding. Festivals are not just rituals but energetic resets. Now, what role does innocence play in spiritual growth? The innocence creates receptivity when the mind becomes simple and trusting. Grace flows easily. Gurudev often says that innocence is higher than knowledge. Meditation restores this natural innocence by dissolving unnecessary mental clutter. In scriptures, divine beings are described as balavat or childlike. Balavat or childlike, not childish but pure hearted. Innocence opens the door to intuition, devotion, and inner wisdom. Gurudev's reference to his own early innocence points toward its spiritual potency. Now, why does Gurudev emphasize dialogue and conversation? The dialogue removes the inner confusion. When people ask questions, they open to knowledge. Gurudev says, uses not dialogue to guide seekers gently toward clarity. Knowledge becomes experiential rather than theoretical. Now, the Vedas were transmitted through dialogue, the Guru Shishya Samvad. The Gita itself is a dialogue. Gurudev continues this ancient tradition, making wisdom intimate and interactive. Now, how do the stories of avatars help us navigate modern challenges? They're there because they mirror our emotional struggles. Avatar stories are symbolic maps. Rama teaches dignity, Krishna teaches strategy, Vamana teaches humility. Gurudev uses these stories to show that Dharma principles are timeless. Avatars demonstrate how divine consciousness handles human situations. Their lives show how to respond, not react to challenges. Gurudev connects ancient wisdom to modern life effortlessly. Now, what is the ultimate takeaway for listeners from this portion of Gyan Ganga? Neither that life is meaningful even during difficulty. Suffering is not a sign of failure, but an invitation to grow. With breath, meditation, and awareness, one can transform every challenge into strength. The message is simple: see difficulties as divine design. Through knowledge, surrender, and devotion, every pain becomes purification, and every struggle becomes spiritual evolution. Jai Gurudev. Now, why does Gurudev start by asking who has not faced difficulties in life? Yes, Gurudev's opening question is not rhetorical, it is a mirror. The moment he asks, who has not faced difficulties, the mind drops its personal complaint and suddenly sees the universality of suffering. Yeah, this is the first step of wisdom, dissolution of mind. And out of him, we say, Samas, yes, Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. So, why does Gurudev say, who has not faced difficulties in life, and what is the deeper spiritual meaning? Gurudev always begins with universal truths because they pierce the ego and connect us instantly with our humanity. When he says, who has not faced difficulties, he is reminding us that suffering is not a personal failure, it is part of the human condition. Everyone goes through challenges children, adults, saints, kings, even prophets like Jesus. The point is not the difficulty itself, but the transformation it brings. When we resist the pain, we accumulate impressions. When we accept and observe it, we evolve. In Art of Living, the breath helps us process struggle without drowning in it. Difficulty becomes a portal to depth. Now, in Vedic thought the dukkha, the difficulty, is not a curse but a catalyst. The scriptures from Ramayana to Bhagavatam show every divine incarnation facing challenges. Rama faced exile, Krishna faced Kamsa, Vamana faced Bali's ego-driven commitment. Through difficulty, dharma is refined. Gurudev echoes this ancient wisdom. When he says difficulties are common to all, the real question is, do we awaken through them? When one recognizes that difficulties are a purification tool of life, the mind shifts from complaint to gratitude and from helplessness to surrender. That is the essence of Gyan Ganga. Now, Gurudev speaks about not knowing the meaning of life. At first, how does this relate to the spiritual awakening? Gurudev says line, when did I know the meaning of life on earth? Highlights the universal moment. Awakening doesn't happen at birth, it unfolds gradually. Many of us grow up without clarity, moving through life mechanically. Gurudev reminds us that even enlightened beings pass through stages. They too experience confusion, inability to read or write at first, and weekly challenges. But the turning point is awareness. When breath, meditation, and satsang enter life, meaning energy emerges organically. Life becomes less about survival and more about contribution. Shastras describe life as a yatra, a journey from ignorance to knowledge. Before knowledge dawns, actions are instinct driven, but when jnana arises, life's meanings reveals itself, the dharma, the seva, the self realization. Gurudev's reference to every week something different mirrors the Vedic idea that experiences come in cycles to prepare the mind. Spiritual meaning cannot be given, it must be discovered through reflection, guidance, and grace. Even incarnations like Vamana underwent phases of unfolding before expressing cosmic purpose. Thus, the meaning of life becomes clear only when the inner light is ignited. Now, what is the relevance of mentioning Vamana avatar in modern life? Vamana avatar represents humility, strategy, and divine intervention through innocence. In today's context, Vamana reminds us that problems are not solved by force but by wisdom. Just as Vamana approached King Bali as a small, simple brahmachari, we must sometimes reduce our ego to rise spiritually. Gurudev subtly mentions Vamana to remind us that the divine takes unexpected forms. Challenges may look small but may contain vast inner lessons. Humility is the gateway to expansion. Vamana's story is a classic, a symbol of balance between devotion and ego. Bali was generous, righteous, but ego driven. The divine incarnated in a minimal form to restore cosmic order. Gurudev's line, Vaman Avatar didn't send Rama and Rangili at their birthplace, shows that divine intervention is never random. It follows the dharma's design. Modern life's confusions like identity crisis, competition, stress can be dissolved only when we embrace Vamana's humility. We grow not by acquisition but by surrender. The avatar inspires us to reduce the inner arrogance and allow divine grace to expand our lives. Now, Gurudev says, I am not doing any work here. How do spiritual masters operate beyond ordinary action? A master's work is not in the outer action but in the subtle. When Gurudev says, I am not doing any work, he means he's not acting out of ego or personal agenda. Work flows to him effortlessly like fragrance from a flower. Masters dissolve the sense of doership, therefore, everything happens to them with the zero stress. This is why millions feel transformed even though Gurudev appears relaxed, playful, and natural. He is rooted in consciousness, not activity. The Bhagavad Gita calls such action the akarma in action, the actionless action. A realized being acts without attachment or compulsion. The Upanishads say he does not act, yet all actions arise from him. Gurudev echoes this Vedic truth while externally he travels, teaches, guides social subjects and projects. Internally he remains still. His actions are offerings to humanity, not personal pursuits. Masters operate from a space beyond effort. They are channels of Ishvara Shakti. Now, why does Gurudev speak of Kerala, Onam, and cultural symbolism? Cultural stories anchor spiritual wisdom in familiar forms. When Gurudev mentions Onam or Kerala festivals, he uses local traditions to explain universal truths. Onam symbolizes abundance, joy, and the return of King Mahabali's benevolent memory. Gurudev uses this to illustrate how societies evolve rituals to express gratitude. Festivals uplift energy and unify communities, something deeply needed today. Through stories, he opens the heart before transmitting knowledge. In Sanatan Dharma, festivals are not mere events, they encode the cosmic principles. Onam celebrates the balance of humility or Vamana and devotion of Bali. Gurudev uses these references to show that traditions differ regionally yet carry a common essence, a gratitude, discipline, and joy. The 10th day's significance is linked to completion cycles in the Vedic timekeeping. When Gurudev says, in Kerala we celebrate on the 10th day, he subtly teaches about regional diversity and unity in Dharma. Now, what does Gurudev mean when he speaks about limits, excess, and danger? Gurudev's statement, if it is more than expected, it will lead to death. There must be a limit, reflects the yogic principle of moderation. Whether it is food, ambition, emotions, or even spiritual practices, excess leads to imbalance. The mind tends to swing between extremes. Breath practices stabilize this. Gurudev prevents us from living compulsively. Discipline is freedom. The Vedas describe life as a balance between rasa or experience and maryada or limits. Everything in nature is a proportion. Seasons, tides, breath cycles. When boundaries are crossed, a pralaya or breakdown begins. Gurudev's remark connects directly with the Rishi wisdom that the middle path sustains harmony. Even dharma must be practiced with balance. Now, why does Gurudev humorously speak about kill less or kill more? Jagadath, this is Gurudev's light way of pointing to the absurdity of moral extremities when he says that some say kill less, I say kill less. But this is not right. He's teaching the ego that hides behind moral superiority. The real teaching is unnecessary violence begins in the mind through anger, judgment, and criticism. Through breath and awareness, we reduce this mental violence. In Dharmic philosophy, ahimsa is not about rigid rules but inner sensitivity. Gurudev humorously mocks the idea of quantifying violence, reminding us the true nonviolence begins with self purification or external policing. The Upanishads call this Sukshma Dharma or subtle righteousness. Now, Gurudev says, if it is far away, it is danger. If it is close, it is dangerous. What does this paradox mean? This refers to the mind's perception of danger. Fear arises not from the object, but from insecurity within. Whether danger is near or far, the mind amplifies it. A virus is invisible, yet we fear it. Fear is a creation of imagination. Gurudev teaches that through meditation, you transcend this mental distortion. The Vedas describe the mind as Mithyadarshi, a projector of illusions. Danger exists only as long as mind clings to duality. Whether near or far, it becomes threatening if the mind lacks stability. Gurudev's statement dissolves a false distinction and urges inner balance. Now, what does Gurudev mean by saying this virus is not even visible? Jagadev, he points out to the humans fear of the unseen more than the seen. This applies to viruses, especially the coronavirus, the thoughts, the future worries, and emotional patterns. Meditation makes the invisible visible within us. Deep impressions, fears, unconscious habits, once seen, they lose the power. In scriptures, the invisible forces or adrishtha shakti are acknowledged. They influence the life subtly. Gurudev reminds us to respect nature and not be arrogant. Awareness protects more than panic. Now, Gurudev often repeats questions like, have you not faced difficulties? Why does a master use repetition as a teaching tool? Gurudev says repetition is not accidental, it is intentional, meditative, and therapeutic. When he asks the same question multiple times, have you not faced difficulties? Have you not? He's breaking the mind's habitual resistance. The first time we hear a question, the ego responds. The second time, memory responds. The third time, the intellect starts resolving. By the fourth time, the question enters the subconscious where transformation truly begins. Repetition becomes a method of drilling truth into the mind so deeply that it can no longer hide behind excuses. This technique is used in Sudarshan Kriya as well. Repetitive rhythms cleanse deep impressions. Gurudev uses repetition to expose denial and awaken the honesty within us. Now, in Vedic pedagogy, repetition is called abhyasa, a sacred practice that stabilizes knowledge. The Upanishads repeat the Tattvamasi not because students forget, but because repetition dissolves the doubt. Rishis knew that the mind forgets the spiritual truth quickly but clings to worldly impressions. Gurudev's repeated questioning mirrors the style of ancient gurus. Ask until the disciple stops answering from intellect and begins answering from experience. His repetition digs out deeply buried impressions of vasanas like a mantra chanted repeatedly, purifies the psyche. Thus, repetition becomes the doorway to clarity. Now, Gurudev says every week something different happened. What is the spiritual significance of life's weekly changes? Like the life moves in cycles, the weekly, the monthly, and the seasonal. Gurudev highlights this to show that transformation is not linear but rhythmic. Every week brings a new energy, new karma patterns, new emotional waves. If we resist these cycles, we suffer, but if we accept them, we flow. In meditation, we observe these weekly shifts. Sometimes joy dominates, sometimes restlessness, sometimes clarity. Gurudev wants us to become aware of life's cycles so we don't identify with any temporary state. When you recognize that each week is a new chapter, your mind becomes flexible and resilient. You stop complaining and start growing. Now, the Panchanga or the Vedic calendar divides life into microcycles governed by planetary energies. Each weekday, like Somvar, Mangalvar, Budhvar, carries a different cosmic influence. Rishis understood that human psychology is deeply connected to these cycles. Gurudev's reference is a subtle reminder that change is dharma. Just as Vamana or Rama had phases in their lives, humans too go through weekly karmic unfolding. When one aligns with these rhythms through prayer, breath, and awareness, life becomes harmonious. Weekly changes are not chaos, they are cosmic choreography. Now, what does Gurudev mean when he says, I am far away, I am here, I am far away? Together, this reflects the paradoxical presence of a master. Physically, Gurudev may sit before us, yet his awareness is expanded beyond the body. When he says, I am here, it means he is available for devotees. When he says, I am far away, it means he is untouched by the world, resting in consciousness. A master is simultaneously accessible and beyond reach, like the sun that shines near yet remains far. This paradox melts the seeker's confusion. We must connect with the master without clinging, love without possession, and learn without dependency. Jagdish, so in Vedas, a realized being is described as a Sarvagata, present everywhere yet nowhere. Gurudev's words echo this. A Jivan Mukta lives in two dimensions, bodily presence or Vyavaharika, and cosmic presence or Paramarthika. His physical body sits in one place, but his consciousness permeates creation. Saints like Adi Shankaracharya, Ramana Maharshi, and Gurudev operate from this expanded identity. He is here for the devotees' heart, but far away from worldly turbulence. This duality is the hallmark of enlightenment. Now, Gurudev mentions danger whether something is near or far. How does this relate to the mind's illusion? Negative Gurudev is pointing to the psychological nature of fear. The mind exaggerates both distant and near threats. If danger is far, anxiety arises. If it is near, the panic arises. Thus, the real enemy is not the danger, but the mind's projection. Meditation reduces this mental exaggeration by bringing us into the present moment where fear dissolves. Breath brings clarity, and clarity reveals that most dangers are mental constructs, not real threats. Gurudev teaches that fear is an illusion born from separation from the self. Now, in Vedanta, fear arises from Dvaita duality. When one sees oneself as separate from life, even a small virus becomes terrifying. Gurudev's statement is aligned with the mantra fear is born of the second. When the mind splits the world into far, near, safe, unsafe, good, bad, it creates fear only when one stabilizes in the self or the Atman. Does fear disappear? Thus, Gurudev uses humor to expose the foolishness of the frightened mind. Now, what is the deeper meaning behind Gurudev saying, I am not aware of or nothing yet? Like that, this line reflects the innocence, not ignorance. And Gurudev playfully says he is not aware of nothing to show that a master's mind is free from unnecessary clutter. He sees everything clearly yet holds nothing. His awareness is totally but non-attached. This level of innocence is the hallmark of enlightenment, complete perception without burden. The Upanishads call this state the Shuddha Chaitanya, the pure consciousness. A realized being experiences the world without accumulating impressions. This Gurudev says he is not aware of nothing, meaning he is not entangled in worldly noise. It is a poetic expression of inner purity. Now, Gurudev talks about viruses being invisible. How does spirituality help in confronting invisible challenges? Like whether it's a virus, stress, or emotional trauma, most threats are invisible. Spirituality strengthens the nervous system, enhances resilience, and reduces panic. Meditation keeps the mind stable, while breathing techniques energize the body. Gurudev teaches that clarity, not fear, is our best shield. Fear weakens the immunity, calmness strengthens it. The Vedic science always emphasized the ojas or the subtle vitality. The subtle energy protects against invisible forces. Gurudev's teachings revive the ancient wisdom. Inner strength is our greatest protection. Through mantras, rituals, purity of food, disciplined routines, invisible threats lose power. Now, why does Gurudev bring examples from Jesus, Vamana, and Indian festivals together? Together, because truth is universal, Gurudev unites wisdom across cultures to show that suffering, surrender, and inner awakening are common pilgrimages of humanity. Jesus' trials, Vamana's humility, Onam's joy all mirror the same spiritual principles. Sanatana Dharma embraces all wisdom traditions. Gurudev's references reflect the Vedic spirit. Let noble thoughts come from all directions. He unites the global stories to illustrate the Hindu universality and compassion. Now, what is meant by dialogue in spiritual growth, as Gurudev mentions? Dialogue with oneself is introspection, dialogue with the master is transformation. Gurudev uses dialogue to break mental rigidity and open new perspectives. In ancient Gurukulas, truth evolved through dialogue, the Shravana, Mana, and Nididhyasa. Gurudev revives this tradition. Now, how can one remain balanced even when life feels unpredictable every week? The sadhana creates the inner stability even when outer circumstances fluctuate. Breath becomes the anchor. The Vedic routines like the Sandhya Vandanam, the chanting, the sevas create the grounding. Aligning with Dharma brings steadiness. Now, what is the core essence of Gyan Ganga according to this section? Gyan Ganga is a river of wisdom that washes away confusion and reveals the inner strength. It's the flowing union of knowledge and devotion and Dharma, purifying and elevating all who listen. Jai Now, what does Gurudev mean when he emphasizes simplicity, independence, stability in life? Gurudev beautifully condenses the entire essence of spiritual living into three words: simplicity, independence, stability. Simplicity means living without unnecessary complications internally and externally. It is not about reducing comforts but reducing the inner clutter. When the mind is simple, responses become natural and stress free. Independence means emotional and mental freedom, not depending on external situations or people to feel happy. Stability is the capacity to stay centered even when life throws storms. In the Gyan Ganga, Gurudev uses simple metaphors like slow roads, old vehicles, tire changing to show that life's journey becomes smoother when we embrace simplicity. In the Vedic tradition, these three pillars are foundational for Dharma itself: the simplicity, the arjava, the independence, the swatantrata, and the stability or the sthirata are qualities of a sattvic mind. Sage literature repeatedly emphasizes that spiritual seekers must cultivate a simple heart, independent mind, and stable intellect. Gurudev is not introducing new ideas, he is reviving the ancient Vedic wisdom in a modern language. These three qualities ensure that no matter how fast or slow life moves, the individual remains rooted in truth and inner clarity. Simplicity purifies the karma, independence uplifts the spirit, and stability brings the lasting peace. Now, Gurudev says problems get inside and trouble us. How does this happen? Problems don't hurt us because they exist, they trouble us because we internalize them. Gurudev often says the world is full of events, some pleasant, some not, but our suffering begins when the mind absorbs those events and creates stories. When we take things personally, emotionally, or repeatedly replay them, we allow negativity to settle inside like dust on a mirror. This is why simplicity is needed. Simple minds don't overthink. Through pranayama, meditation, and sudarshan kriya, we learn to release impressions instead of storing them. Vedanta clearly states mana eva manushanam karanam bandha mokshato. The mind alone is responsible for bondage or liberation. The mind is like a pot. Whatever enters it shapes its fragrance. If we allow anger, fear, or jealousy to enter unchecked, they trouble us from within. Gurudev's statement aligns with the ancient teaching that impressions or samskaras enter subtly and disturb the prana. Vedic rituals, the chanting, and the sattvic living Purify these impressions. The problem is not the world, the problem is absorption. Spiritual practices prevents the inner contamination. Now, Gurudev mentions the slow progress like moving 10 steps forward and 7 to 8 steps backward. Why does this happen? Jagadish, this is the classic pattern of inner transformation. When we begin spiritual practices, the enthusiasm is high. We take big jumps in awareness, but old habits, conditioning, and emotional patterns drag us back. It's like a rubber band. You stretch forward, but it pulls you back. Gurudev reassures us that even if we slip, the forward movement is never lost. That is why consistency is more important than speed. Our nature has layers. Transformation is gradual, like peeling onions. The key is not to get discouraged. In Vedic psychology, this backward movement is called the vasana balam, the force of old tendencies. For births and births, the mind accumulates impressions. One lifetime of practice cannot instantly dissolve them. Scriptures say progress happens in spirals, not straight lines. You rise, fall, rise again, each time at a higher level. Gurudev's analogy of old roads versus new roads symbolizes the journey of the seeker. Earlier, the inner path was rough. Now, with Gurudev's grace, knowledge, and global support structures, the path is more accessible, yet effort remains essential. Now, Gurudev says we are not on the expressway but on a regular road. What is the deeper meaning? Like the spiritual growth is not instant like fast food. It is slow, cooked, nourishing, and deeply transformative. Life doesn't always give expressways, smooth, straight, fast paths. More often, it gives the winding roads, bumps, and traffic. Gurudev reminds us that this is natural. Expecting instant results creates frustration. On the road of life, every delay teaches patience, every turn teaches flexibility, and every bump strengthens resilience. The journey is the teaching symbolically. The expressway represents intense tapasya undertaken by sages, years of isolation and deep meditation. Today, the common man lives in society amidst responsibilities. His road is different, slower, but equally valid. Dharma teaches that each path has its speed. The key is not the pace, but moving in the right direction. Gurudev's compassion ensures even householders can progress steadily with simple practices. The road may be slow, but the destination is guaranteed. Now, why does Gurudev repeat everything has to be done with simplicity? Jagadav, he repeats it because repetition breaks the patterns. Complexity is ingrained in modern life. We overcomplicate relationships, decisions, emotions, and even spirituality. Gurudev uses repetition like a mantra, gently reminding the mind to relax. Simplicity brings clarity, clarity brings joy. When actions are done simply without ego, show, or pressure, they become effortless. Simplicity reduces mental noise, allowing intuition to guide us. In Vedic pedagogy, repetition or the abhyasa is a method of installing wisdom. When a teacher repeats a point, it becomes a samskara. Sages say simplicity is austerity itself. A simple act done with purity is more powerful than complex rituals done with confusion. Gurudev revives this ancient teaching through a contemporary voice. Simplicity keeps us aligned with Satya or the truth and the Dharma or righteous action. Now, Gurudev speaks about enthusiasm. Why is enthusiasm so important? Enthusiasm is the pranic fuel of life. Without it, everything becomes dull. The work, the relationships, the sadhana, even seva, the selfless service. When enthusiasm rises, creativity flows and obstacles shrink. Gurudev emphasizes keeping enthusiasm inside and spreading it everywhere because enthusiasm is contagious. In the art of living, we use the breathing techniques to keep the prana energized, thereby keeping enthusiasm naturally high. The Rigveda calls the enthusiasm the ojas, the glowing energy of life. A person with high ojas uplifts society like a lamp illuminating a dark room. Without enthusiasm, even dharma becomes mechanical. Gurudev connects the ancient teachings with modern life by reminding us that enthusiasm is both a spiritual asset and a psychological strength. It keeps the mind positive and prevents downward spirals. Now, how can we spread the truth as Gurudev says? Jagadev, spreading truth does not mean preaching, it means living authentically. When our life reflects simplicity, joy, compassion, and stability, that life itself spreads the truth. Gurudev encourages living by example. People absorb more from vibrations than words. Truth spreads through presence. In the Vedas, the Satya or the truth is not just a factual correctness, but alignment with the cosmic order. When we speak truth with compassion and living righteously, we become instruments of Dharma, sharing knowledge, chanting mantras, and upholding values also spread the truth. Gurudev's guidance strengthens this ancient duty. Now, why do people want fast results and how does it affect the spiritual growth? Gurudev, the modern world conditions us to expect instant gratification, the instant food, instant messages, instant entertainment. But inner growth is not instant, it is organic. When we want fast results, we become impatient, and impatience blocks the growth. Spirituality teaches patience, surrender, and trust. The Bhagavad Gita explains that fruits come in their own time. When desire for quick results increases, tamas and rajas disturb the mind. Gurudev highlights this so seekers don't get discouraged. Slow progress is still progress. Now, how do breathing practices help maintain simplicity, independence, and stability? Like the breath is the bridge between the body and mind. Gurudev often says that when the breath becomes simple, the mind becomes simple. Most complications in life are created by agitation in the mind, and agitation always reflects in the breath. Either it becomes shallow, fast, or uneven. Through Sudarshan Kriya, Pranayama, and guided meditation, we reset this disturbed rhythm. As the breath becomes harmonious, the mind regains clarity. This clarity brings a simplicity to thought and action. Independence arises naturally because your happiness no longer depends on external triggers. It is anchored in your breath. Stability is a direct outcome. Your mind becomes less reactive and more resilient. Even when life throws challenges, the breath keeps you centered. Now, in the Vedic scriptures, the pranayama is considered a sacred discipline that purifies the nadis and stabilizes the prana. Stability of breath is linked to stability of consciousness. In your yogic text, it is said when the breath wanders, the mind is unsteady. When the breath is steady, the mind becomes steady. Gurudev is bringing this ancient science into everyday life. Simplicity comes when the mind is sattvic, breath practices increase the sattva. Independence comes when prana is strong. One is not swayed by emotions. These breathing practices are not just physical techniques, they are spiritual tools for maintaining the very qualities Gurudev highlights. Now, Gurudev mentions the slow improvement in prana. How can one stay motivated despite slow progress? Now, the slow growth is natural because inner transformation involves a deep rewiring. Staying motivated requires accepting the rhythm of life. In Art of Living, we tell students to celebrate the small victories. A little more patience today, slightly less anger, a deeper meditation experience. Gurudev reminds us that even 10 steps forward and 7 to 8 steps back means progress of 2 to 3 steps. Motivation grows when you stop comparing your journey with others or your ideal expectations. Surrounding yourself with positive company or satsang and practicing regularly and listening to knowledge talks helps keep the flame of enthusiasm alive. Now, the Vedas teach the Kramaneva Pravartate. Everything progresses step by step. Even nature moves slowly. Trees grow inch by inch. Rivers carve mountains over centuries. Spiritual seekers should adopt the nature's space. Gurudev's analogy of old roads and tire changing reminds us that earlier paths were even slower. Today, with refined techniques and Guru's grace, progress is faster than ever before. Motivation arises when the seeker trusts the process. Divine timing is perfect. Our role is consistent effort as long as the direction is right. Speed does not matter. Now, how does the simplicity reduce the mental stress? Negative stress is a result of mental overcomplexity. When we complicate small issues, carry emotional baggage, or worry about outcomes, stress spells a simplicity is the art of seeing things as they are, not as we project them. A simple mind doesn't hold grudges, doesn't overanalyze, and doesn't seek unnecessary drama. Gurudev's emphasis on simplicity is a part to natural stress relief. In the sky, the Sudarshan Kriya Yoga programs, when students reduce the inner clutter, to rhythmic breathing, they instantly feel lighter as if a burden is removed. Vedic wisdom describes the simple mind as a Shuddha Chitta, a pure consciousness free of distortion. Such a mind experiences fewer fluctuations of vrittis. Simplicity leads to Satya, and Satya itself is freeing. When actions flow from simplicity, there is no conflict. An absence of conflict is peace. Gurudev's teaching is aligned with the Yoga Sutras, where Patanjali says peace arises from reducing the mental fluctuations. Simplicity is the first step. Now, why do people slip back into old patterns even after spiritual progress? The patterns are deep rooted impressions or samskaras are stored in the subconscious. Even after meditating and feeling light for a few days, old triggers can reactivate these impressions. Gurudev reassures us that this is expected. Slips do not erase the progress. The key is to not judge oneself. When the mind relaxes to breathing practices, impressions come to the surface and release. Sometimes this release feels like slipping backward, but it is actually the cleansing. Regular practice makes the new positive patterns stronger than old negative ones. Now, in the scriptures, these patterns are called the vasanas. They are tendencies carried across lifetimes. Even great sages face them. The Bhagavad Gita says self effort and divine grace together burn vasanas. When Gurudev says not to worry about going backward, he is echoing Krishna's assurance. No sincere effort is ever wasted. Each slip is an opportunity to strengthen the awareness, just as rivers meander before reaching the ocean. Seekers also oscillate before attaining the steadiness. Now, how do we cultivate the inner stability in daily life? Yeah, the stability comes from regularity, regular sadhana, regular meditation, regular self awareness. Gurudev often says the mind likes the discipline. When the mind knows it has a fixed routine of silence and breath work, it behaves better during challenges. Stability also comes from not getting entangled in unnecessary conflicts. Choosing peace over reactions deepens the stability. Eating sattvic food, spending time in nature, and participating in seva are powerful stabilizers. The stability or the sthirta is a spiritual virtue. Scriptures say stability is born when the mind is anchored in the self of the Atman. Practices like the mantra chanting, Homa, and the study of scriptures naturally stabilizes the consciousness. Gurudev simplifies these ancient teachings so even modern households can practice them. Stability grows when actions align with Dharma. When life is lived ethically, the mind becomes unshakable. Now, Gurudev emphasizes enthusiasm repeatedly. How can one sustain the enthusiasm daily? Negative enthusiasm fades when the mind becomes dull or exhausted. Sky practices boost the prana, which directly fuels the enthusiasm. Gurudev says enthusiasm must first be protected, avoid negative conversations, overthinking, or draining environments. Then it must be nourished through knowledge, music, meditation, and service or seva. When you uplift others, your enthusiasm multiplies. Gratitude also sustains the enthusiasm by shifting focus from complaints to blessings. In a Vedic view, enthusiasm is divine energy. Deities like Agni symbolize it. Rituals begin by invoking the Agni because enthusiasm ignites every action. Guru's presence itself is a source of enthusiasm. Scriptures advise associating with the wise or the satsang to maintain the high energy. Gurudev brings this ancient prescription alive through satsangs, knowledge sessions, and seva opportunities. Enthusiasm becomes natural when the mind is sattvic. Now, why is it important to spread the truth in society? Like the truth brings harmony when individuals live authentically, society becomes healthier. Gurudev encourages spreading truth not through arguments but through living examples. When you embody the peace, compassion, and simplicity, people around you feel inspired. Truth spreads silently through vibrations in spiritual communities. The presence of truth ensures trust, growth, and joy. The Vedas declare Satyam Eva Jayate, truth alone triumphs. A society built on falsehood decays, truth aligns human life with cosmic order, or rather, spreading truth is a dharmic duty. Gurudev's teachings revive this ancient dharma in modern language. Truth must be shared with humility, compassion, and wisdom. Now, how can one balance worldly responsibilities with spiritual values like simplicity and stability? The balance comes from awareness. Gurudev says you don't need to withdraw from the world, you just need to carry the inner peace into action. When the mind is stable, even busy responsibilities feel lighter. Simplicity helps avoid overcommitment and burnout. Prioritize what truly matters and let go of unnecessary complexities. Spiritual practice gives the energy needed for worldly duties. Now, the Gita teaches Yoga Karmanu Sukoshalam. Yoga is a skill in action. Spirituality enhances worldly efficiency. Sages were householders too, yet deeply spiritual. Simplicity reduces distractions, allowing focus. Stability ensures decisions are wise. Gurudev integrates these timeless principles into modern living. Now, what role does patience play in spiritual growth? Patience lets the mind relax and accept the journey. Impatience creates the resistance, and resistance blocks the growth. Gurudev compares the patience to driving on a normal road. You can't speed, but you reach steadily. Meditation increases the patience because it trains the mind to settle. In scriptures, the patience or the shama is a divine quality. It is essential for dharma. Even nature operates the patiently. Gurudev's teachings align with this eternal wisdom. Progress is sure for the patient seeker. Divine timing is perfect. Now, how can one overcome the feeling of moving backward in life? They are the first accepted without guilt. Second, continue practices steadily. Third, stay connected with the teacher and the knowledge. Gurudev assures that backward movement is temporary. The overall trajectory is upward. Reflect on how far you have already come. Scriptures say setbacks are purification. They burn the old karma. A seeker must have shraddha or faith that every experience forward or backward is for growth. With the masters as guidance, no step is wasted. Now, how does one cultivate the inner independence? Jagadev, independence means the emotional freedom. Through meditation and breathwork, we reduce the dependency on external validation. Happiness becomes self generated. Gurudev calls this the freedom from inside. The Upanishads define independence as abiding in the self. When identity shifts from ego to Atman, dependence drops. Gurudev's teachings are modern expressions of these Upanishadic truths. Now, what is the final message Gurudev conveys to this segment of Gyan Ganga? Together, that life should be lived with a simple heart, enthusiastic spirit, and stable mind. Progress may be slow, but a certain breadth is the key. And that truth must be lived, not merely spoken. Simplicity, independence, and stability are eternal spiritual pillars. Gurudev is guiding humanity toward a harmonious and inner and outer world. Gurudev. Now, why does Gurudev emphasize the shift from driving slowly to now we have a scooter in our spiritual life? The Gurudev uses simple metaphors that speak to our daily living. When he says earlier we had to drive slowly and now we have a scooter, he is pointing toward the evolution of human consciousness. Earlier spiritual practices were slow and effortful. People struggled for years with doubt, confusion, and heaviness. But today, with techniques like Sudarshan Kriya, Pranayama, and meditation, transformation happens faster. Just like shifting from walking to riding a scooter, enthusiasm has become our engine, our breath practices have become our fuel, and the guidance of a master has become our map. In the Vedic the Dharma tradition, speed represents accessibility. In earlier centuries, scriptures were limited, temples were far, and knowledge reached the people slowly. But today, spirituality is available in minutes. Through satsangs, the mantras, and Gurudev's wisdoms, the scooter signifies the blessings of Dharma, accelerating one's journey. Gurudev reminds us that while the vehicle has changed, the destination remains the same. Truth, the peace, and the Dharma. Hence, the spiritual progress can now be fast if one keeps the enthusiasm alive. The Gurudev says keep the enthusiasm inside and spread it everywhere. What does this mean? Negative enthusiasm is the life force of a seeker. Gurudev always says when enthusiasm drops, the mind becomes heavy. So, keeping enthusiasm means maintaining the inner freshness, curiosity, and joy. Spreading enthusiasm is not by preaching, but by being a living example of positivity. When people see your lightness, they get inspired automatically. In Dharma, the enthusiasm of the Utsaha is considered a divine quality. Without it, even noble tasks become burdens. When Gurudev says spread it everywhere, he means make society vibrant with sattva through seva, chanting, meditation, and compassion. A society where enthusiasm flows is a society free from fear, anger, and stagnation. Now, why does Gurudev repeatedly say we have to spread the truth? The truth or the Satya is not an ideology. It is sincerity, clarity, and inner alignment. Gurudev wants each individual to live truthfully, not hiding the stress, not suppressing emotions, not living double lives. When millions live authentically, the society becomes peaceful. In Sanatana Dharma, Satya is the foundation of Dharma. The Ram Mandir movement is a living example of truth prevailing after 5 centuries, 500 years. Spreading truth means restoring cultural integrity, bringing scriptural wisdom to modern minds, and ensuring society is anchored in righteousness. Now, how does truth spreading in society creates peace? The conflict arises when people live in falsehood, ego, assumptions, misunderstandings. When truth spreads, the transparency increases, communication improves, and compassion blossoms. A society that honors truth naturally becomes peaceful. The Ram Raja itself was built on Satya. When leadership is truthful, people flourish. Now, Gurudev said that the Ram Mandir inauguration was done by Lord Krishna. What is the deeper meaning? Gurudev often speaks in spiritual symbolism. Lord Krishna represents the divine consciousness, meaning divine grace orchestrated the entire Ram Mandir manifestation. Traditionally, Krishna is Sampurnata, the wholeness of Dharma. He completes whatever remains unfinished. Symbolically, Krishna fulfilled what was pending for centuries. Now, why was the entire country celebrating the Ram Mandir? Because it touched the collective emotional memory of India, it healed a wound carried for generations. It was not just a religious event, it was a civilization revival. Like the 12th century celebrations, devotion was overflowing. Now, Gurudev mentions we are going back to 12th century celebration. How? He refers to the purity of devotion and collective joy seen in ancient times. Temples and were centers of music, dance, culture, and unity. Today, that wave has returned. Now, what does Gurudev mean when he says people are asking too much? Is it true or not? Together, it points to the human tendency of self doubt. Even when truth is in front of us, the mind questions unnecessarily. The dharma, the shraddha, or the trust is essential. Excessive questioning without openness leads to confusion. Now, why does the mind create its own doubt? Because the mind is designed to protect us by questioning, but overthinking creates the self created illusions. Doubt is a tamasic quality when not aligned with wisdom. Now, Gurudev says we consider this a civilized, educated issue, but it is not. What does he mean? Spiritual truth is not intellectual, it is experiential. Dharma is not an academic debate, it is lived reality. How do Tulsi plants represent wisdom and emotion? The plants respond to energy. Tulsi, with its fragrance and vibration, reflects sattva and devotion. In scriptures, Tulsi is the Vishuddha. One Tulsi represents the knowledge, another represents the bhava. Now, can plants really hold emotions? Studies show plants react to music, intention, and environment. Vedas describe the vanaspati as beings with subtle feelings. Now, what is the meaning of civilized issue, the vishaya? There is something refined, subtle, and emotionally intelligence. It refers to matters requiring sensitivity and purity. Now, what is bhava pradhan? Where emotion, devotion, and feeling lead the heart. In rituals, bhava is more important than action. Now, why does Gurudev say bhava must get up when you are in deep slumber? Slumber refers to emotional numbness. Bhava awakens your heart again. It's the awakening of devotion after long suppression. Now, how can one awaken bhava in daily life? Through chanting, meditation, singing, seva, and gratitude practices, by visiting temples, performing puja, reading Ramayana and Bhagavatam. Now, why is devotion essential for peace? Devotion dissolves the ego, while devotion also aligns the heart to dharma. Now, how does spreading truth reduce drama in society? The drama comes from gossip, fear, and duality. Truth simplifies life, where simplicity and society become stable when truth and dharma are upheld. Now, how can we maintain enthusiasm in challenging times? Through breathwork, satsang, and connecting with Guru energy by reminding ourselves of our cultural strength and divine heritage. Now, what is the final message of this Gyan Ganga segment? Live with enthusiasm, devotion, and truth. Return to dharma. Revive the ancient values. Awaken bhava, and society will rise. Say Gurudev. Now, how do enthusiasm and truth together create a thriving society? The enthusiasm without truth becomes impulsive excitement, easily collapsing when challenges arise. Truth without enthusiasm becomes dry, rigid, and lifeless. Gurudev blends both, showing that a society flourishes only when its people are both alive in spirit and anchored in reality. Enthusiasm brings energy, creativity, and openness, while truth ensures direction, stability, and integrity. When citizens embody these qualities, relationships improve, workplaces transform, and families become nurturing spaces. Gurudev frequently says healthy enthusiasm is a spiritual wealth. If individuals maintain joy while being rooted in honesty, no external negativity can overpower them. In Dharma Shastras, the utsaha, the enthusiasm, and the satya or the truth are two of the six qualities of an ideal human being. Ramrajya was built on these principles: enthusiasm in service, truth, and governance. When truth spreads in society, the corruption reduces, conflicts minimize, and people trust each other. Enthusiasm adds devotion, cultural pride, and unity. This combination revives the civilizational spirit seen during the Ram Mandir celebrations. Joy with righteousness, hence both qualities together create a stable, harmonious, and spiritually successful society. Now, how does Gurudev's teaching help people overcome self-doubt? Is it true or not? Like the self doubt is the biggest obstacle in spiritual growth. Gurudev explains that the mind keeps asking repetitive questions not because truth is unclear, but because the mind lacks rest through Sudarshan Kriya and meditation. The agitation settles and the inner clarity emerges. When prana flows smoothly, confusion dissolves. Many participants experience that their constant questioning stops after 1 hour of swimming course because they begin experiencing the truth directly instead of intellectually debating it. The Vedas describe the Sandeha or the doubt as a fog that covers knowledge. The cure is Anubhava or the direct experience. Rituals, the mantras, and the temple visits and the satsangs create an energetic environment that clears the doubt. Gurudev's teachings reconnect people with their cultural roots, removing the inferiority complex that modern society often imposes. When one sees thousands celebrating Dharma fearlessly, doubt disappears. In this way, Gurudev uplifts both the individual mind and the national consciousness. Now, why did Gurudev compare modern celebrations to those in the 12th century? He wants to remind us that devotion is timeless. In the 12th century, temples were centers of art, music, knowledge, community gatherings, and spiritual dynamism. People celebrated life through culture. Today, with the resurgence of spirituality, that cultural richness is returning, seen in grand temple inaugurations, mass chanting events, and collective meditation gatherings led by Gurudev. Historically, the 12th century was an age of temple civilization. Kashi, Puri, Rameshwaram, Khajuraho, and Somnath. Society was culturally alive and spiritually vibrant. Gurudev sees that we are entering a similar phase of revival. The Ram Mandir celebration echoed ancient Bharat's unified devotion. It wasn't just a religious movement, it was a rebirth of a civilizational identity. Now, how can modern youth relate to these ancient values? The youth today crave authenticity and purpose. Gurudev presents ancient values in a modern language that resonates with them. The breathwork, the stress relief, the emotional intelligence, leadership. When youth experience peace and meditation, they naturally become curious about the deeper wisdom of their culture. Dharmic values like truth, courage, compassion, and seva are universal and timeless. Our duty is to show youth how these values improve career, relationships, and mental health. When explained practically, youth embrace tradition with pride. Now, what is the significance of saying plants have emotions? Now, it opens our heart to sensitivity. If a plant can feel, how much more will human beings feel? This awareness makes us kinder. Gurudev uses this point to show that life is interconnected and every creation affects the environment. The Shastras describe plants as one sense beings capable of experiencing pleasure and pain. Tulsi, in particular, holds a sacred vibration that responds to devotion. Now, what is the role of Tulsi as a symbol in Gurudev's explanation? Negative. Tulsi represents purity. When Gurudev says one Tulsi symbolizes wisdom and another emotion, he means every household should have both the intellect and devotion. Tulsi is offered in temples because it absorbs the spiritual vibrations, hence, it becomes a bridge between emotional devotion and intellectual understanding. Now, why do humans oscillate between intellect and emotion? Because we are designed to be whole, but life conditions us into extremes, either too logical or too emotional. Gurudev teaches balance through meditation. Dharma says intellect without bhakti becomes ego, bhakti without intellect becomes blind. Both must coexist. Now, what happens when emotion becomes a dormant in deep slumber? People become numb, indifferent, and disconnected. They lose joy. Meditation reawakens the heart. Unchecked materialism can make emotions dull. The bhavana gets buried under stress. Rituals and satsangs awaken it again. Now, how does society change when people awaken their bhava? There, the compassion increases, conflicts reduce, creativity rises, people support each other, cultural festivals revive, temple culture flourishes, and social harmony strengthens. Now, why does Gurudev emphasize emotional intelligence along with devotion? Neither because devotion without emotional maturity leads to fanaticism. Emotional intelligence helps one express devotion with awareness. Our scriptures always paired bhakti with vivek or discernment. Gurudev is reviving this ancient balance. Now, how can one practically spread truth daily? By living honestly, speaking kindly, and doing seva and encouraging others, by upholding dharmic conduct, the fairness, transparency, and integrity. Now, why does drama reduce when truth spreads? Because truth removes misunderstandings, drama arises from ego and deception, truth dissolves both. Now, what is the spiritual meaning of celebration according to Gurudev? Celebration means honoring the present moment. Celebration reconnects society to its cultural roots. Now, how does devotion give strength in modern life? It gives the emotional resilience and inner stability. It connects us to a divine protection and ancestral wisdom. Now, why is questioning one's own doubt important? Because it reveals that the doubt is a mental habit, not truth. Scriptures advise examining the source of doubt instead of blindly believing it. Now, what is the difference between healthy inquiry and confusion? Inquiry leads to clarity, confusion leads to paralysis. Shastras encourage inquiry or paripashna, but caution against endless skepticism. Now, why is society today returning to spiritual roots? Either because modern life's stress demands deeper meaning, because dharma is cyclical, it rises when society needs healing. Now, how do the celebration and devotion heal the collective trauma? They restore joy and belonging. They rekindle the pride and unity and cultural identity. Now, what role does Guru play in awakening emotion? The Guru ignites dormant feelings of love, compassion, and belonging. A Guru protects the disciple from inner distortions and guides toward truth. Now, what final guidance does this section of Gyan Ganga offer? Keep the enthusiasm alive, spread truth and awaken the emotion. Live with devotion, revive the dharma, and build a harmonious society. Jai Gurudev.